patience with Thank you for your patience with the rescheduling of this meeting. I really do always make a point to look ahead at religious calendars, and boy, did I ever miss it on Yom Kippur. So I apologize to everybody for that. And thank you again for being able to reschedule. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the agenda for today. And so I wouldn't mind, we haven't done good news in a while, and I hope if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and do that. I've had a bit of a stressful week myself, so I might enjoy hearing a little bit of good news. I'll let somebody else start. Jason, I'm going to pick on you because you're next on my screen.
Jason Swan here, he, him, his. Good news. I guess every day I wake up and I'm alive is a good day. So that's usually where to start. But I'm down here in Palisade, Colorado. And I've been able to work, with some of the commissioners for Mesa County, and that's been just great to see the collaboration between elected officials and community members here to work on their green and open spaces. So I'm proud to be a part of that. And with that said, I will turn over to Brad.
Hey everyone, I'm Brad Patterson, and I am the CASR liaison for the Adaptation and Resiliency Committee. And I work on natural resources and nature-based solutions, all of that. Pass it on to Anna.
Hey everyone, my name is Anna McDevitt. I'm on the Energy Committee. I use she, her pronouns, and I work for the Sierra Club. And my good news is that I'm watching a friend's puppy this weekend. So I have a really cute 4-month-old that is wreaking havoc in my house right now, but it's kind of fun to have around. Let's see, Winna, you want to go?
Sure. Hi, I'm Winna, Director of Communications and Engagement for CASR. And my good news is I was able to squeeze in one more backpacking trip this weekend. And I will pass it over to, I see Stephen on my screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Stephen Shepard with Building Owners and Managers Association, and I'm the co-chair of the Building and Homes Subcommittee. And my good news is I just got back from a 2-week vacation and thankfully was able to, over the 2 weeks, I don't think I spent more than an hour and a half on work stuff. So was actually able to unplug, and I tell you what, it is the greatest thing. And I think that we all need to start doing that more often. I know 2 weeks is often hard for people, but we went to the Mediterranean with our family, and all the history and everything just kind of makes you feel good when you think about where the world was and where we are now. And I will pass it over to Jim.
Hey everybody, I'm Jim Peterson. I'm the Mountain West Region Vice President for Trust for Public Land. On the good news front, I'd say I spent yesterday at a day-long retreat for the board of Keep It Colorado, which is the coalition of land trusts in Colorado. We were working on how to continue to grow and strengthen that organization for the benefit of conservation across the state. So super energizing to be amongst a bunch of really smart, committed folks working on these issues from every corner of the state, just thinking about how to make our lives a little more connected to the outdoors and sustainable, and make sure that what we love about this state continues to be front and center. So very energizing way to spend 8 hours in person with people I like. Let me hand it over to Winna.
I've gone, but I'll kick the ball to Naomi.
Thank you, sorry.
All good. Good afternoon, everyone. Naomi Amaha. I'm the Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the Denver Foundation. I co-chair the Sustainable Transportation Committee with my colleague Stuart, who I'll kick it to next. I guess some good news is I'm in San Diego with a friend trying to take some time off before, things are really ramping up with the election. We're engaged with a lot of ballot measures this cycle. So trying to relax a little bit before things really ramp up. And I'll turn it over to you, Stuart.
Great, thank you, Naomi. I'm Stuart Anderson with Transportation Solutions. My good news is that our upcoming tax credit for alternative transportation was featured in Bloomberg this week. And what was so exciting to me is that a professional association that I'm with wrote an article about it. And in that article, they said that Colorado is an example for states like Washington, Oregon, and California. And I thought, I haven't heard that kind of a statement in a very long time. So it's nice to be leading with some good examples. I will pass it to Armando.
So SAC, my name is Armando. I'm co-chair with Anna on the Energy Committee. The good news front, the company I work for, Iontra, we do lithium ion charging solutions, and we just closed a $40 million Series B funding round led by Volta Energy Technologies, which is a EV infrastructure type company. So we're kind of being brought into that investment group and just doing exciting stuff here on the energy front. Getting ready to start doing conferences with some other state climate tech companies. So it's been a blast doing all that. And then, yeah, so that's my good news. And then I'm not sure if anybody's left that has their camera on, ready to speak.
Yeah, we've got Lubna and Ash.
Lubna? Okay, can get to Lubna.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Lubna Ahmed. I am with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment's Environmental Justice Program. And my good news is that I am really highly functioning off of very little sleep right now. And I haven't even had coffee yet today. So I'm just really impressed with whatever's going on in my brain that's allowing me to do this. So yeah, feeling very grateful for that. And I will pass it on to Sam.
Thanks, Linda. Hey, everybody. Sam Domeyer, and good to see everyone. Sorry if I'm echoing.
That's okay, Sam. Anna, did you get to go?
Sure.
I sure did.
Did we get all the actual SAC members who are here? No, Ash, we haven't heard from Ash. Were you able to speak today, Ash?
Hi, Ishwarya Nair, Ash, part of I'm one of the co-chairs of the Zero Waste Committee. My good news is my computer is locked up, so I might get to end my workday early. I'm waiting for help desk to come save me, but I can get on this call. If I disappear, they did something. I'm going to take that as a positive, though.
Yes, glad you could join us then. All right. I don't know if any other cast or staff want to share, but I guess I did think of one good news. I took one of my kids fly fishing over the weekend and I caught a fish. And it was an 18-inch rainbow trout. And it was the first time I caught a fish. That was pretty exciting. And it was catch and release, obviously. I'm sorry, did any other cast or staff want to share something and say hello?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you. Sam Domeyer, Electrified Mobility Administrator with CASR. And I think some good news that just got announced about an hour ago. If any of you are skiers, Arapahoe Basin is opening this Sunday.
Good to know. I see Taylor, Chelsea, and Jorge. Any of you would like to share? No pressure.
Hi, this is Jorge, Community Partnerships Administrator with CASR. We just completed right now a rapid assessment with Illyria Swansea institutional stakeholders. We had a visit from environmental justice class from Mesa College, and it was an incredible, really super inspiring meeting.
My name is Chelsea Warren. I do communications for CASR, and I'm going to like an ABBA tribute concert tonight, and I am very excited. It should be a lot of fun.
All right.
And I'm Taylor
Yeah,
Bowlers. I am on multiple devices helping out with some of the tech stuff, but I run our Sustainable Neighborhoods program, and I am running away to the mountains with my dog and no cell service, Wi-Fi, anything this weekend, and I'm very excited to disconnect.
Have at it. All right, well, thank you, everyone. We hadn't done that in a while, so I appreciate that. So our first order of business is just to give you an update on your recommendations to us. Now, I put a link to that in the email you received about the agenda. If you want, you could give me a show of hands if you want me to pull that up on the screen instead and show it. Does anybody want me to do that? Okay. So I think, Brad, since you're here, would you mind taking a moment to talk about your BMP toolkit for soil volume and the DPR Resiliency Youth Program, as well as the Welton Street tree volume? I think you had a couple of good updates. Thanks, Naomi.
Yeah, sure. So the soil volume toolkit is being worked on currently by the chosen consultant, which is Design Workshop. And we've done a couple invoices with them. We're about 26.5% done as far as the full funding of the toolkit. So still some work to be done, but it's still on pace to be done by the end of the year. And that's going to be a great toolkit to inform the best situation for the tree to become the most mature and give the most benefit. So I'm really excited to look at that once it comes out. I think we should be having a draft coming soon for us to review. As far as the Welton Street trees, guaranteeing 1,000 cubic feet for all the trees along Welton Street that are going in through that project, that revitalization project. That is still on hold. And it's been agreed that that will be the case for all the trees that go in there, but none have gone in yet. And for the Resiliency Youth Program for Parks and Rec, we are still waiting on budget to go through. We want to make sure that the program is approved for budget for next year. And then we're hoping that the recommendation to double that budget from the SAC will be able to be put into play, and we can double the impact of the youth program. And those are the updates.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Sam, is it possible for me to put you on the spot to speak about the cycling incentive and how we're making progress on that?
Yeah, I can give a little update. I think Mike is probably better suited. I know
Yeah.
he's out of the office today, but yeah, definitely taking the recommendation from the SAC and looking at what that might look like. And so tossing around a few different ideas internally, but hopefully we'll be able to provide some more updates on that structure and how that might benefit Denverites in the coming weeks. So I don't have a whole lot more to share,
Okay.
but that is the quick update.
That's fine. I know Mike has been working on an RFP, so I think he's hoping to get that out sooner rather than later.
Yes, hopefully this fall
Okay.
sometime. So stay tuned.
Great. And I think the only one that I definitely want to update on is the micro transit service. So although on our sheet, it shows as in process, I really, in a sense, I consider it complete because Dottie is definitely adding a fourth vehicle to the Montbello connector, and it has committed to replicating that service in the global Elyria Swansea community. And our agency will be funding an all-electric vehicle as part of that fleet. So that commitment is made, but I sort of think it's probably going to stay as in process until the micro transit service is everywhere we all want it to be. So I will just continue to update you I'll continue to update you as those services get rolled out and as plans are made to expand it to other communities. Did anybody have any questions about any of the other recommendations you've already made? Right, I don't think I'm seeing any. And so has every committee had a chance to look at the recommendation template that includes the new equity assessment? I hope everybody here is familiar with it. Would you like to take any time now to discuss it? It's not required, and we do have 2 recommendations today that have used it. And so we may have questions or thoughts about it come up through those presentations. But did you have any initial thoughts or comments you wanted to discuss about it before we get into our report outs?
I'll have a quick thought. Our committee, as we're going to discuss in our report outs, has been working through kind of a trio of proposals in these different breakout groups to talk about, tackle different aspects of energy, energy policy. But my breakout group, we opened up the recommendation templates to, start kind of brainstorming how to fit this thing. And the equity assessment was in there, and it was a great initial stopping point and framing, just to start framing the conversation for early on, to focus on all of the assessments and questions. So I can speak to its efficacy early on, even aside from the 2 proposals that are already using it. So that's a positive note for me.
Great. Thanks for that. And I think if I do this correctly, everyone, I'm going to drop, like Naomi did, I'll drop the link in the chat so you have access to it while we're talking. All right, well, with that, then I think we can move into our report outs, if that's all right. And buildings and homes. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my screen.
That's me.
There you are. Sorry.
That's
I don't
all
know
right.
about you guys, but on my end, Zoom moves around a lot.
Yeah.
People move
Based
all over
on
the
who's
place.
talking and all that. Yeah.
Okay, go ahead,
And
Stephen, take it away.
so Aaron couldn't be here today. They have a closing on a new property that they're working on with a nonprofit that is evidently a little more challenging than they had expected. So, and I wasn't at our last meeting, but they spent a lot of time talking about the under-resourced buildings program for the Energized Denver and trying to make sure that, what were some of the other areas of support and technical assistance that they could provide, knowing that those buildings are going to be some of the ones that probably have the most difficult challenge of compliance. A lot of those under-resourced buildings are falling probably underneath the 25,000 square feet, which means they have to do the like LED upgrade and things. So it's not, what they have to do is not necessarily difficult. It's just making sure people understand what the requirements are. And then they also spent a amount of time going over the social equity index and other equity work that's being done by the building and homes team to ensure that where that's being kept at the forefront, as Grace just mentioned, with this new template and everything. That's so I think that was, and then Aaron and I met with Katrina yesterday, and we're trying to talk through some things and as to kind of what we as a committee could be working on, rather than just kind of being the sounding board for stuff that's already in the works. With Energized Denver and all that kind of took place before this committee actually even became what it is. So one of the things that we're going to start looking at is, how do we separate out the homes and the buildings piece so that we can make sure we've got the right people focused in the right areas. Cooling is something that we've been thinking through, is that's going to be something that, as we kind of talk through, especially from an equity perspective. And the other piece that we started thinking of, and I think that we will want to reach out with the resource management. The green building ordinance, now that we've got Energized Denver ordinance, and then with some of the codes and stuff, that's going to start, I think, we think it's going to start causing a lot of confusion. There's a component of that, though, that's around kind of landscaping and how we make sure we utilize green space within, and that's part of that green building ordinance. And so the conversation is, how do we take the code around landscaping and make sure that that becomes part of the overall scope of things, so that we don't have these little one-off ordinances like the green building ordinance versus having everything kind of rolled into the overall energy ordinances and et cetera. So I think that that's something that the SAC could push, that we believe the SAC could kind of push forth. We know that there's a lot of other departments that kind of have their hands in that work when you look at Dottie, Parks and Rec, and right where all these different things lie. And so it's a big lift, but we think that if there can be some kind of at least opportunity for us to look at what other cities have done, what that at least a framework would look like to where we could get the work started so that, in the next couple of years, we can move towards having everything very much more consolidated into code and it doesn't become, these piecemeal things here and there. So that's kind of where we stand.
Thanks, Stephen. Does anybody have any questions for Stephen? All right. Let's see. Thank you very much then, Stephen. Okay, so climate adaptation and resiliency.
Hey, that's me. At our last meeting, we had a couple of great speakers from Denver Parks and Rec talking about that department's resiliency program and the South Platte Rivers and Tributaries project. This is part of our ongoing effort to make sure that our committee members have a strong bit of background on a number of the climate adaptation resiliency efforts going on across the city. We've started to hone in on a short list of focus topics for the committee to consider. We're going to create some subcommittees or smaller teams to look at individual priorities that have come out. We put out to the committee members using Google Forms a survey to identify the priority ideas that would like to be explored in more depth. And at our meeting next week, we'll hone that down further and create these committees and really start diving deeper into some opportunities that committee members have surfaced. That's where we're at.
All right, thanks very much. Does anybody have any questions for Jim? No. All right. Then I think, Armando, I just saw you come on camera. And I think that is over to you, isn't it? Energy.
Yeah, myself and Anna. And yes, for our report out, we've been working on, like I mentioned earlier, some proposals kind of inspired by some of the other committees that have presented groups of proposals at once. We've been struggling with the Energy Committee because the scope is pretty vast. A lot of different ways to talk about energy and the city's relationship to it. So we've kind of taken a strategy with breakout rooms that Johnny and Leslie brought forward a couple months ago, and it's been working great. We do a monthly meeting at the Energy Committee, and we've had 2 of these so far, and the engagement level is through the roof for us. So we're super stoked. So I'm going to speak about my breakout room, and I'm going to let Anna kind of report out on the others. But our breakout room was over the subject of municipal decarbonization for the city. So what Denver is doing for its municipal projects to decarbonize, and had a lot of work scoping this out. And so we're still kind of in the preliminary stages, obviously, of wording this, but our recommendation is kind of focusing on our draft recommendation on encouraging energy projects that the city gets into to leverage state, federal, and Excel energy funding. So like the IRA being a great example, and funding for brownfield sites and things, and just kind of like, doubling down on encouraging us to leverage that. And as well as, with these municipal decarbonization projects, seek the benefits that are, after decarbonization, what are the next most important factors, and kind of help scope that as ways to provide these to the community. For example, like, there's a lot of solar and battery banks in the city, setting up emergency shelters for if the grid ever goes down and people are freezing or need AC or something. So that's an example. Also just, putting an emphasis on underrepresented communities in the workforce and the renewable energy force and stuff, which the city already has a lot of experience doing. So, so that's our breakout group, and I'll let Anna kind of summarize the others.
Hey y'all, so quickly, just so you know, the goal coming from our committee now as we get a little more organized here is to use these breakout groups to come to this group by the January meeting with some new proposals. So just now that's coming your way. We're getting organized. The quick report outs for the other committees. So the other two we've got, one is energy policy and regulatory advocacy, and then the other is community facing energy and incentive programs. And so on the energy policy and regulatory advice side, we're particularly interested in the city's position in both the XL demand side management docket, as well as the XL electric resource plan at the Public Utilities Commission. These are both proceedings that the city is intervening in, and we'd like to do some of the community listening and stakeholding necessary to try to inform the city's position in those cases in the places that we can. And so specifically, one next step we've got on that, I'll put it in the chat, is we're gonna, Sierra Club, along with Mi Familia Vota, is gonna be hosting a listening session in South Denver next month to hear from folks who live near the Arapahoe gas plant, which will be a issue that's gonna come up in XL's electric resource plan next winter and spring. This is a gas plant that I think I probably mentioned on this call before. It's in the middle of a disproportionately impacted community that's overly burdened by a number of health burdens and other things. And so we want to hear from the community about what they think about it and how they want to engage in the PUC proceeding that's coming up. So the link's in the chat. If you have any advice, we'd love it. If you would like to join us, please do. And if you know anyone who lives in the area, please send it their way. And then the other group, the community facing energy and incentive programs group, they're looking into a couple of things. One, what are some of the weatherization program opportunities that we could support as the SAC? And then the other thing is trying to solve for a problem that we have in XL territory right now, where if a customer upgrades their system in a way that increases their electric load and triggers infrastructure upgrades in the community, they're responsible for paying for that, which is a huge barrier to folks being able to decarbonize their homes. And so we're starting to think through what are the ways that we could potentially use the Climate Protection Fund to make that not a barrier and to like proactively conduct evaluations in Denver Nest neighborhoods for where that could happen and make sure that that's upgraded so that it doesn't fall on low income residents in Denver. So sorry that ended up being longer than I wanted it to, but that's what we're up to. And we'll hopefully have more updates for you at our next meeting in January.
For me, that's really helpful to hear. Thank you for all that work. Does anybody have any questions for the energy team? All right, well then we're headed over to environmental justice and our colleagues here have a recommendation for us. So Jason and Lubna, please take it away.
Thanks, Grace, and thank you, everyone. You know, it's last time I was here, I had to abruptly leave, so I feel like it's important to give some context and background, a lot of which you probably already know so already, but I think it's pertinent to do so. So just to recap briefly, in 2020, obviously the council bill created the Climate Protection Fund, which raises about $40 million annually to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, air pollution, adapt to climate change. And as we all know, that statute requires 50% of that spending directly benefits climate for vulnerable communities. And in my opinion, this was a direct and important call out by council members to redress the inequities that have historically excluded and discriminated against vulnerable communities of Denver, and particularly those who are communities of low wealth, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, young people, elders, and women who are pregnant. So in that council bill, there were 6 allowable uses identified, one of which was the neighborhood-based environmental and climate justice programs. So the CPF, or the Climate Protection Fund 5-year plan, allocates 10% of that total expenditures to CPF environmental and climate justice allowable use. So as newly made co-chairs this year, and because of the significance of this environmental justice committee, Lupna and I made this our first task to provide guidance to SAC and KZAR on the definition and scope of neighborhood-based environmental justice programs and neighborhood-based climate justice programs. So over the course of the few months that we've been working this in lockstep with LUPNA and our Environmental Justice Committee members and Environmental Justice Community members on the
Jason,
ground.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but our interpreter said it's a little hard to hear you. Do you think you might be able to come closer to your microphone?
Let's see here.
Thanks.
I'll speak up too, if that's helpful. So, you know, we spent some time reshaping the document to get us to a point of a consensus to present that significant foundational work to you today. So on that note, I would be remiss not to mention that the Environmental Justice Committee is the only committee that does not currently have a full-time staff to focus exclusively on funding environmental justice projects as per KZAR's mandate and commitment. And if you haven't heard the news already, the tax raised more money than initially anticipated. So now voters get to decide whether the city should keep the extra funds or give it back to taxpayers, or debrucing it completely, which would allow the city and county of Denver to retain and spend all the revenue it collects. So knowing this, I hope that today's budget presentation for 2023 will have a commitment from KZAR to do just that, which provide us a full-time person here. And with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Lupna. She's gonna discuss some of the definitions.
Awesome, thanks, Jason. And I just dropped a link to our guidance document in the chat. This is a document that Grace provided in the same email that had the agenda in it. And this is the guidance document on the Climate Protection Fund's environmental and climate justice allowable use. I just wanted to kind of out loud review the definition that the EJ committee has come up with. And if you're following along on your own screen and want to click on that link, this is at the top of page 3. So we have drafted this definition that neighborhood-based environmental and climate justice programs are localized, community-led advocacy efforts that seek to redress the detrimental impacts that environmental pollution and climate change have caused on disproportionately impacted communities, and seek to eliminate exclusionary and discriminatory policies and practices in environmental racism by developing environmental, climate action, and social justice solutions that are equitable, fair, and inclusive. And in our definition, we would like to accomplish this by providing intersectional and culturally relevant education and engagement to identify and address the root causes and impacts of environmental pollution and climate change. We would also like to do this by promoting and developing healthy, livable neighborhoods by remediating pollution and protecting people in the natural and built environment. And then lastly, enabling equitable access to resources and creating pathways for civic collaboration through the participation and amplification of voices of those most impacted, and democratizing environmental, climate, and social justice solutions, especially through strategies and solutions that are inclusive, intersectional, and focus on communities of lower wealth, Black, Indigenous, people of color, people with disabilities, young people, elders, and women who are pregnant. As you can see in our guidance document, we go on to provide some examples of the types of programs and projects that we foresee the grants being able to fund. I will not read through those, but just know that they are there. And this is not an exhaustive list. It's just meant to serve as a list of examples of what we hope that the funds would support. And then lastly, I do, just for the advisory council's sake, just kind of be clear on the type of eligible parties for this funding. So we had talked about nonprofit organizations, tribal governments, urban indigenous groups, registered neighborhood organizations identified by the Denver Municipal Code. Chapter 12, Article 3 is where you can find that. For-profit businesses, social enterprises, new or existing coalitions whose purposes meet the criteria under the definition of neighborhood-based environmental and climate justice program. So that's just kind of an overview of where we've landed. As Jason mentioned, the EJ committee has been really thinking about the funding that will be available for this program, and really being intentional about how that money is being used. And we would love to kind of hit the ground running and make the most of this grants program. And we do hope that there will be kind of a more increased capacity in terms of EJ support within CASR itself. So thanks all. Any questions?
Yeah, this is a great time for discussion. Thank you. I see Naomi.
Yes, thank you. And it might be a question for you, Grace. Process-wise, if the SAC does recommend this to your office and you all agree with this change in definition, does anything have to go to council, or like what does that look like to actually implement that definition change?
So I think that the first thing that happens is it comes to CASR, and then we have to examine it. And I would have to get back to you to see. That is our obligation, right? We come back to you, we give you our feedback, and if it's determined that something would have to go to council, yeah, we would do everything possible to avoid that, because it's actually not council. It would have to go back to the voters if there was a change. So we would not want to do that. So it's more like, just is this vision the way that we could implement the programs?
Gotcha. So you could, okay.
We do have to do an examination of it for sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anna, and then Jorge.
I have two questions and maybe a comment based on the answer. So one, the program specifically funded by the Climate Protection Fund. It's not like a program that's funded by state or other federal funds as well, right? Like this specifically just comes from the CPF.
Lubna and Jason, I think that's a question to you.
Yeah, so the CPL 5-year plan allocates 10% of those total expenditures to this CPL environmental and climate justice allowable use. So yes.
Okay, cool. And then I guess the reason I asked is, as we're having this conversation right now, there's a lot of organizations that are having the same conversation about defining the environmental justice grant funds that are going to come out of the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level. And so this is maybe just like a comment about an opportunity or something we're thinking about as a group here, which is if, as we're allocating these funds and defining them for the city of Denver and what that means for the community, is there a way that we can also incorporate the $60 billion of funding that's going to come from the IRA for stuff like this as well, or maybe like as part of the definition or the website or whatever it is where organizations can go to apply for this funding? Is there somewhere on there that we can also require information about how those organizations can also take advantage of federal funding so that they're really getting all the resources they need to do projects in Denver? Because there's going to be $27 billion coming down the pipeline for greenhouse gas reduction related projects. Some of that's specific to like zero emissions technology and technical assistance. Sorry, that's the puppy. And then like, I want to say like $3 billion worth of block grants as well. And so I'm just wondering if there's a way that should fit into this conversation as we update expectations or definitions about Denver's EJ funding programming.
So let me just make sure that I'm clear, because I feel like that's another question that can come to CASR with this recommendation, is to ask, can any element of the definition here be applied to the city's own work in applications or use of money coming from the federal government through the block grants and everything else through the IRA. But then also it sounds like what assistance can be provided to community-based organizations that can apply for money under these categories. Is that right?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. All right, thanks, Jorge.
Yeah, this is just a point of clarification. The Climate Protection Fund was created under an enabling city ordinance that was passed by the city council. The enabling ordinance of the Climate Protection Fund establishes 6 allowable uses under the Climate Protection Fund, where all of the funding of the Climate Protection Fund needs to be pigeonholed through. And each sustainability, it seems like each of the allowable uses has its respective standing committee under the Sustainability Advisory Council. The reason why the standing committee chose to give guidance is because it feels that it's guidance specifically to the allowable use under the enabling ordinance. And typically, whether it's like city council or state or even like federal legislation is broad, and then it's given to the executive agencies to basically define and implement legislation. So I think the expectation of the committee, but Jason and Lubna, please, you can clarify if I'm wrong, was not to send this to the city council, but just to provide clarity to CASR as the administrative agency that is implementing the Climate Protection Fund to provide guidance for the investments. And so under the legally mandated, I would say, allowable use of climate justice and environmental justice under the enabling ordinance of the Climate Protection Fund. And then to answer also your question about the relationship with the other definitions, I think also that one justification for this was that in the 5-year plan, CASR had written a federal definition of environmental justice. And it seemed like the committee also felt that it was really important for the city's environmental justice workers to develop its own definition and not to use a definition coming from Washington, D.C. I think under Justice 40 and probably many other programs like the one that Lubna is running with the CDPHE, I think that to the extent that local governments use definitions of climate justice that are created by the local workers and by the local communities from the ground up, instead of imposing definitions coming from the state or from federal programs, I think that they seem to be more authentic, and they would have probably more leverage, more power, hopefully, to even be able to justify bringing state and federal funding to some of those, guiding areas that the EJ committee identified for funding.
Thank you for that. Are there other comments or questions for the committee on this recommendation? All right, well, we do have a quorum. In my last count, we have 11 voting members here. Would you like to use either well, not everybody's on camera. So if you want to use perhaps the actual raise hand function to signify if you would like to vote to send this to CASR for our analysis and response. I see 9 participants have raised hands, and that is good enough to send it our way. Thank you, committee. I know that you've been working really hard on this for quite some time, and I think frankly, you dove in to this right away. And of course, this is also building off of work that was done by the previous CARE-J committee as well. So we really appreciate your efforts. And I will take this back to our staff, and we will come back to you with any feedback and thoughts.
Grace, I'm sorry, can I interject? If you
Yes.
wouldn't mind, just if you can drop your name if you were a yes vote. I think I saw 1 extra hand, so I could keep that in our notes.
Okay. Lashida, you still have your hand up. Did you want to say something, or is that your vote?
That is my vote.
Okay, thanks. All right, thank you all very much. Moving on next. You know what? Science and research, actually, I don't think we have anyone here because Lisa has taken on additional duties at work. And so she actually just resigned last week. And then Jay had declined the meeting today, wasn't able to make it. So I'm afraid I don't have a report out from that committee. But Sustainable Transportation's here. And so Stuart and Naomi, would you like to report out? And when I still see your hand up too.
Sorry.
Okay.
Great. I'll start out. Naomi, please chime in where it comes up. Obviously, we're very excited to hear about the bike incentive RFP going out. That was a recommendation that came from our committee. And so it's nice to be able to go back and report, that things keep moving forward. And also along the lines of the microtransit, the Montebello expansion. I've been hearing so many good things about that service and how it's connected with the community. It is a success. And so it's really nice to see, that. We presented the last meeting on a parking district. And at that time, there were equity concerns that were raised. And Naomi, please chime in if I get this wrong. We passed it to the folks that deal with equity issues outside of our group. And so we're hopefully going to get some feedback on ways to improve that recommendation vis-a-vis equity concerns. So that's not something we have today to bring to you for a vote. We are also discussing a social marketing campaign. We have a subgroup that's been working on this effort and making some great recommendations. That's not complete yet either. There are questions regarding the effectiveness of social marketing campaigns, as well as the costs that can come from buying media. So these are things that we're still investigating. We are stepping forward with what we're calling at least a transit dignity program, trying to make the experience of using transit more enjoyable, more safe, and respectful of those travelers. And our last meeting, we had a great presentation from Dottie about the plans to invest in benches and trash receptacles and shelters. They did an inventory of the bus stops around the city. And what we're looking at right now, and in fact, at 3 o'clock today, we'll be discussing the idea of how could we make a recommendation as a committee that could expedite some of these investments. Because when you look at this spread over time, there are a lot of bus stops that are not going to be getting attention, especially in areas where there are equity concerns and safety concerns. So if there's a way that we could provide a match for a federal funding application or other ways that we could bring funding to expedite this in critical areas, that would be helpful. So that's something that we're considering. And I'll pass it to you, Naomi. I'm doing all the talking here. Sorry.
You're good. I'm alone now, so I can talk. No, thank you for that, Stuart. And I think I will share having our colleagues with Department of Transportation and Infrastructure share the work that they're doing to help inform where a recommendation from our group could be helpful was really great. So I think we'll continue to do that. We also had representatives from the mayor's Bicycle Advisory Council present at our October meeting, sharing the recommendations that they're making to Mayor Hancock in relation to policy, programs, funding, the city's budget was extremely helpful. And I think will also help to inform as we think about what are supports to get people out of vehicles and use their bikes more frequently. We also had, and I wasn't able to attend that meeting, but the mayor also has a pedestrian advisory council. So we had a similar presentation, again, that really I think helps make sure that we understand what our kind of peer advisory groups are working on and to see where we can be more collaborative in relation to our recommendations. And I think Stuart covered all the recommendations we're discussing and working to flesh out, and we hope to have something for you all as we start the new year in 2023. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Does anybody have any questions for our transportation committee?
Grace, I had a quick comment,
Yes.
I guess, really more than a question, that I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with this sidewalk ballot initiative and what effect that's going to have. And I felt that's why I was thinking maybe this transportation group is probably, what, feeder transportation, I guess. So I think it's good, and what that's going to do to the city as far as, whether it's going to be a positive or negative impact, I guess, right? We don't know until we know.
Well, I get to say my favorite line that I say lately, which is, as a city employee, I am not permitted to say anything for or against any ballot initiative. But all of you are not city officials. You are allowed to discuss it as you wish. Jim, do you have thoughts to share?
Yeah, just one quick thing. And I guess responding to Grace, what you just said, I'll say, hey, please vote for the sidewalk initiative. I thought I'd just put on the radar of the transportation committee just a heads up about 3 mobility related, community driven intra-neighborhood loops that are being worked on across the city. One is the Westwood Via Verde. Another is the 303 Artway in North Park Hill, and the Montbello Freshlow Loop is the third. All of these are in different stages of envisioning and planning and talks with Doty and Denver Parks and Rec. I can put you in touch with folks that are on the Trust for Public Lands team that are working on this. If you have any questions or if you want someone to speak to the committee, I'd be happy to. But it might be an interesting thing to think about as you look through all of your priorities.
Thanks, Jim.
All right, thanks for that, everybody. Any other questions or thoughts for the transportation committee? All right, then, oh, do we lose? No, Ash is here. Great. Ash, so good to see you.
Still
Take it
here.
away.
Still here. If I look distracted, it's because help desk keeps doing things on my computer. So the Zero Waste Committee has had they're actually having a meeting right now, our October meeting, and we've had a monthly meeting since we've met last. We're continuing to try to have every other meeting in person, and Grace actually attended, I think it was our August meeting. And it was a great discussion that we had around expanded waste services. Yeah, that it actually ended up taking up most of our meeting, but it was really a very good discussion that we had on the topic, because we're moving, sorry, not expanded waste services, the other one. I'm forgetting its name here.
I'm allowed to say the title, Waste No More.
The Waste No More. I was like, no, it's the other 3 letters. Waste No More. Yeah, so we had a good discussion around Waste No More because that is on the ballot this year. And it was great to have Grace there to give us some insight and some input. In our other meetings, what we've been continuing to discuss is in our 2 subcommittees, we talk about on the waste side, there is discussion around how our committee could potentially support or with the rollout of expanded waste services. There was a lot of questions around that in, I think, our last 2 meetings. So actually in today's meeting, we have Jessica Lally from Doty attending to give an update on how the city is planning to roll out the expanded waste services initiative. We are also discussing around for the food subcommittee, we're discussing around what we would like the 3 and 6 months priorities to be, especially as we roll into 2023. And one of the priorities that we believe should be brought to CASR is actually our recommendation around making I believe it's called the Food Waste Coordinator, Food Waste Program Administrator position, a permanently funded position within the city. This is currently a position that sits within DDPHE and is completely grant funded. So the person who is holding that position is usually trying to push forward initiatives while making sure that there is grant funding to keep that funding open, to keep that position open and ongoing. So that is something that we wanted to bring to the committee today to discuss, as we would love to see CASR take this and make it a permanently funded position so that the person in this position can focus on food waste reduction initiatives across the city as well as food education initiatives around the city to help make food reduction a less of a problem. So, they're doing some great work. They're reaching out to communities across Denver. They're helping with food banks. They're helping with, we did the food waste reduction program with the restaurants a few years ago, Food Waste Challenge. And that program itself is, I don't know how many people know about it, but it was to get some restaurants in the cities engaged in how they could divert food waste and reduce it. That program has been very successful within Denver, but it served as a template for programs in North Carolina and Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. So we think that this position could go really far in helping Denver become a leader in reducing food waste in the country itself. So that was something we wanted to bring to everyone's attention today.
Thanks for that. I hope everybody had a chance to read the recommendation. Does anybody have any comments or questions for Ash about it? There's usually a process question. So how about if I add that? So once this recommendation, if you vote for this, the recommendation comes to us. Now, obviously, our agency has no control over what a different agency does with its positions. However, having just been through the budget process, I feel like this is the type of information that can help another agency make its case to the Department of Finance and all the other powers that be above us who make the budget decisions. So every year we request what are called expansions. And when I give my presentation on the budget, I'll explain more about that. Expansions are requests for more money. Obviously, the finance department receives many more requests than it can fill. And so then it's left to the agencies to make a case. And so I think this is just one more helpful endorsement, if you choose to do it, that might help that agency make their case when the time is right. So any questions or comments for Ash? All right, well, shall we use the raised hand again? Winna, maybe you want to just take a screenshot if you want to. Raise your hand if you are in favor of sending this recommendation to CASR, which then we would share with the Department of Public Health and Environment.
Great. Yes, and if you could just keep your hands up for a minute.
Yes,
I see 8.
The count at the bottom on my screen is 9 have raised
9.
hands, so that's great. Thank you. Got it, Winna?
9.
All right, so
Got
that
it.
is also coming our way. Thank you very much. All right, and now we'll go to what I believe is our first screen share of the day. Let me make sure I can do this. Here it is. You will let me know, yes, you are seeing my presentation. I need to put it into presentation mode and get myself off the screen. There it goes. All right, thank you. So what I'm going to give you today is the presentation about our budget that I gave to City Council. Almost the same. I've taken out some parts that I took out our greenhouse gas emissions inventory because you've seen it and it hasn't changed. And also just in the interest of time. Jason, to your point earlier, this does not actually have CASR's line by line budget for next year. So that is something that I can follow up with another time. Our budget process doesn't quite work like that. So what we have to do, the way this process works is back in May, we made our expansion requests. We go all the way through until September when we present to City Council. And by that point, we have generally our approvals for our expansions. Once this process is done, which it now is, now we actually can start making our exact project determinations for the following year. So it's not quite as thorough as perhaps you were hoping for, but at least this is going to give you the basics of how our budget process works. Okay. So the other thing that this presentation does is it focuses on our general fund requests. So what you are most familiar with is the Climate Protection Fund. Our agency has a great deal of authority over that fund, almost entire authority. I would say there's always an asterisk, right? Because everything that we do does need to be approved by the mayor. But generally the mayor trusts us to do the work and approves of all that we're trying to do there. The general fund is different. This is the big fund that is made up of all of our sales taxes. Sales and use tax is the primary source of funding in the city's general fund. Property tax is the next, but property tax is actually only 11% of the city's general fund. And then the rest are a series of taxes and fees that the city collects. So all of that goes into one big fund, and then it gets parceled out to all the different agencies for a variety of our functions. Now, when CASR started, was formed in 2020, we were given what was called our base budget. And so whenever we ask for an expansion, it's in addition to that base. And so just in case I use any of those terms throughout, those are what I'm talking about. And since I can't see you anymore, if you have questions as we go along, you can say something. Otherwise, I'll take questions at the end. All right, so after a long hiatus due to the pandemic, our Sustainable Neighborhoods program returned this year with a renewed focus on reaching under-resourced communities that had not previously been engaged with the program. And you know, Taylor's here and she manages that program for us. So this year, we were able to provide $25,000 to groups for projects like environmental health survey collection and analysis, beautification projects and community events, and sustainability education campaigns. So we have received additional funding, or we've received approval for additional funding for next year. And it says half a position, but what that means is we get to hire another staff person in the middle of the year. So it will become a permanent position. We're just not allowed to hire it in January. That's why it's shown as though it's part-time, but it's not, it's just half the year. So we're going to be able to increase the services that we're able to provide. We're going to be able to reach more neighborhoods. And then we're also able to provide more funding for those organizations, which we're excited about. Also, after a pandemic-induced hiatus, our Certifiably Green Denver program came roaring back in 2022. So last year we received $100,000 to give out to companies in our program to help them with climate action efforts that they're trying to do in their businesses, like replacing aging refrigeration units with Energy Star equipment, or electrifying their company fleet, or getting compost services, which is something that some businesses have been interested in. So although we had $100,000 to give, we received over $250,000 worth of applications. So we know the demand is out there. And so we requested additional funding for next year so we can meet more of that need. And we were approved for that. And we were approved for one additional staff person. You can see that it's shown as one, which means it is for the full year. So we'll be able to post that position. I think they usually let us do it in late December so that we can actually get started with hiring right away in January. So we're, again, excited that we're able to grow this program. Translation services. So since our origin 2 years ago, we have been committed to providing our public-facing documents and messaging campaigns in multiple languages, and to providing live translation for our public meetings like this one. And so both in person and virtual. And so this need is going to continue to grow. And so we requested and were approved for additional funding for more translation services in 2023. And I'd also like to add that as of right now, we have 11 people on staff who speak languages other than English, with 7 fluent or conversational in Spanish, including 2 native Spanish speakers. And those who use their language skills as part of their job function are allowed to receive an additional stipend from the city for having and using that additional skill as part of their job. The Energize Denver program, we also requested additional staffing and additional funding. Now, our agency has already committed $60 million of the $200 million in the 5-year plan total of the Climate Protection Fund to support the Energize Denver ordinance implementation. So that includes hiring staff and providing technical assistance and guidance to building owners and managers we're also pumping half of that money directly into the local market to accelerate the transition of decarbonizing our large buildings. And so our commitment to bringing this policy to life is significant. And we asked for additional funding from the general fund, specifically to augment the support that we're providing to buildings that serve under-resourced people, like affordable housing buildings, and to enhance the support that we are providing for market rate buildings, for the market rate building sector prior to their first reporting cycle in 2024. So obviously, compared to the funding we're providing from the Climate Protection Fund, this amount is small, but we think that the staff we hire and the resources we'll be able to provide will be highly valued by this important sector of Denver's business economy. And so this is just one comment on the Climate Protection Fund, because again, the focus of the city's budget presentation is always about the general fund. I just want to note that over here, I guess this is the left, this is the allocation estimated in our 5-year plan in terms of the percentages toward each allowable use. And I just wanted to show that we are projecting that we are on track in each of those categories. And so again, you know, Jason and everyone else, I can come back to you with another presentation with more detail on how that money is being allocated and the types of projects it's going to, not unlike what we have in, or what we displayed in our annual report. But I can come back and give you more detail about this. But I think it's important that we're actually pretty on track with the amount of the percentage of funding per allowable use. Looks like a chat just popped up. Let me look. Okay, yes, that'd be great. Okay, next. So in my budget presentation, all of our budget presentations have the same format to City Council, except that I always deviate from that because I collect information from all the other city agencies to tabulate what work they're doing that's related to climate action, but it's in their budgets. So it shows really what the city's doing as a whole. So I can walk you through that now. So energy efficiency and renewables, across all of our different agencies, we have nearly $67 million dedicated to this in their 2023 budgets. So I apologize, I didn't change all of the acronyms. And again, this is for City Council, so they always know what these are. So CCD is City and County of Denver, DEN is the airport, NWC is the National Western Center, DPR is Parks and Rec. So basically, there are a lot of different agencies that manage buildings, and all of them are doing some level of work related to energy efficiency and adding renewables to their buildings. One project I'm especially excited about is there's a small maintenance building being built by Department of Parks and Rec. It's called the Smith Road building. They already had it in design, but we asked them last year if it might be a candidate to be net zero. And they went back to their designers. We helped pay for just a small amount of money to study whether or not that would be possible, and it is. And so it really looks like that building is going to move forward as a net zero building. So we're all pretty excited about that. And of course, you're probably very familiar with a lot of the programs that we are offering, such as solar and renewables, battery storage for human service providers, our climate action rebates, and workforce development programs. All right, sustainable mobility. A lot of this is in DOTI. And because of course, DOTI is the agency that does all the big infrastructure like sidewalk improvements, as well as bike lanes, which we are all advocating for more of the high comfort protected bike lanes, in addition to completing the 125 miles of bike lanes that the mayor committed to before his term is ended, and they're on track for that. Obviously, the neighborhood microtransit program is in here as well. And obviously all of our incentive and rebate programs too. Natural resources. This is almost entirely Department of Parks and Rec. That is where our Department of Forestry is housed, and also the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, because between the two of them, they manage all of the public land in Denver. So whether that's park property, streetscapes, tree lawns, all of that work is done by those two agencies. But this total also includes the water quality sampling and analysis that our colleagues in the Department of Public Health and Environment do. The airport actually has a very large an innovative and important recycling loop system, which is fully enclosed for the de-icing fluid. And so we consider that really important for enhancing and protecting natural resources as well. And hopefully you're familiar with our community tree planting program with which Brad is managing. And we are aiming to plant 2,000 trees in the next about 2.5 years. And so we're excited about that. Waste, obviously the big story in waste this year is the expansion of waste services. And if I remember correctly, the total on this one last year was only $4 million. So the fact that it's over 20 million at this point for next year is pretty exciting. Obviously, it's all about the provision of the service to our residents, but also the education and outreach that's going to go along with that. All of that is under the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. You remember that we help them make the pitch. We help them with all the community engagement. But now that it's been passed, they are carrying the ball the rest of the way and actually getting that program up and running. One thing I'll say for us, and Ash probably knows a lot about this from her work with the committee, we have some really interesting studies underway this next year that we think will lead to new policies for sure, and potentially new programs that will get us closer to that circular economy that we're all interested in, and also just stopping waste before it starts. So looking at the reuse economy and how we can grow that in Denver. The Dine In with Reusables is a pilot program that we're going to be running with small, I'm not going to say fast food restaurants, right? Because I don't mean the big chains. I mean like your local sandwich shop or local pizza or taco shop that you like to go to. How can we work with them to use reusables instead of disposables? And then we're going to also conduct our first consumption-based emissions inventory, which will give a much more accurate picture of what consumption and waste, what type of impact that has on our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Okay, next is air quality and public health. Again, a lot of this is with our colleagues in the Department of Public Health and Environment. They run the Love My Air program. They do all the air quality and measuring and monitoring and education around that in the city. They also have, as you know, from the recommendation you just made, that's where our healthy food and food waste prevention programs are housed under that agency as well. I apologize again, OCA is the Office of Children's Affairs, and they run obviously a summer meals program, and 20% of the food that they purchase through that program is locally sourced. And then one big news, I don't know if you caught this over the last year, but the airport finally has money to actually plug the abandoned oil and gas wells that are on its property. And that is really important for air quality in Denver. And that was pushed by a couple of city council members. And I think we're all very pleased and relieved to see that happening. And of course, we have all of the community engagement and outreach that our agency does. So almost done. This category I call the intangibles. We don't really put all the money that all the dollars figures that you saw in the other categories, that does not include staff salaries. That's actual program and project line items in the next budget just for 2023. So in this category, the advocacy really does refer to the staff people who assist with this type of work across the city, but we don't put dollars to it because again, we try not to just take credit for ourselves coming to work. But the city attorney's office, CAO, is incredibly important to our work. They assist us in all of submitting all of the testimony that our agency does, as well as DDPHE to the regulatory agencies that govern entities that are outside of our control. So that's really important. CPD is community planning and development. They have a large development process that we're a part of that creates rules for any new development that's over 5 acres in the city. And there's actually a lot of that still happening. That's an important process. Obviously, we make testimony to regulatory bodies, and then many staff people are on boards and commissions for the state, city, regional, and that is how we are transmitting and expanding our reach and our influence statewide, region-wide, and statewide. And so finally, we have next year's total. And so with all the agencies combined, we are committing over $155 million to climate action through all of our different agencies. And what's important here is that the first time I gave this presentation was in the fall of 2020. And at that time, the total was $70 million. And so we have more than doubled in just 2 years. And this is a commitment across all agencies. It does include our fund, obviously, but other agencies, especially through their general fund requests, they are participating in our climate action work, and our collaboration with them is really critical and important. So I will stop now so that I can see you. But I'm happy to bring up slides again at any time. So I'm ready for your questions or comments.
Hey, Grace, any idea how that $155 million figure compares to other comparably sized cities and their investments?
That is a good question. I do not. I think I don't know that for 2 reasons. One, I haven't actually taken the time to look. And 2, I don't know that other cities would have a total generated in that same way and issued publicly. But that's certainly something that we'd be happy to look into and see what we can find. I can tell you that we're the second, I'm pretty sure we're the second best funded climate agency nationwide. Portland does have more money through their taxpayer supported fund than we do. And I think there may be cities like larger cities like New York City. I don't actually know what their budget is. There are larger cities, so they may have a larger budget, but I think per capita, we have an extremely large budget. Good question though. Other questions or comments? Marcel.
Hey, yeah, this is really exciting. I'm just curious, would you attribute that doubling to like conversations that CASR is having with other department leads, or do you think it's more of a culture shift among these department heads and just the city?
I would like to say it is, I think it's honest to say it's a combination of both, but I would also say that one of the great things that our staff has been able to do is and this is, I think, under Liz's leadership, we managed to get ourselves into the review process for the capital improvement program. So capital improvement program budget is, let's say, somewhat parallel to this city general fund. It's just it's a subset of it, but it's all like in infrastructure dollars. And so what we've managed to do is to get climate related questions into the review process for all of those projects. And I want to add that the Office of Social Equity and Innovation, they also have equity questions in the entire budget process. So there are equity questions in both in all budget requests. There are equity and climate questions in the infrastructure requests. And so I think that that elevation has come through collaboration and culture shift, and then making us a formal part of the process really helps a lot too. Other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you for your attention to that. And as pledged, I will come back to you at a future meeting with more detail about our budget specifically, so that you can see that in advance of our annual report. All right, and so that concludes the formal agenda items. We are now at the section of other or announcements. And I know, Anna, you already shared your one event, which is exciting for everybody to know. Does anyone else have any announcements, any information to share, any work that you would like others to know about? I am not seeing any hands. How many hands up for who would like 35 minutes back in your afternoon? Minus Brad. Looked like Brad wanted to say something before we adjourn. Go for it, Brad.
Yeah, sorry, I came in late. I just wanted to let everyone know there's a community tree planting event called the Valverde Forest Fest on tomorrow, and it's from 12 to 2, happening in the Valverde neighborhood. And it's kind of a kickoff for one of the contractors doing the community tree planting work, the park people, and it should be a really exciting and fun event. So looking forward to that.
Do you have a location or a link to drop in the chat?
I do.
Before
I
everybody
can.
hangs up and doesn't have the chat anymore.
Yes, let me see if I can find that real quick. Thank you.
Well, you know what, Brad, we can also email it out. That's okay.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Wonderful to see you. Have a lovely end of the year. Good luck with your next meetings, and I will see you bright and early in the new year, first week of January. Thanks very much, everyone.
Take care. Thanks.
Thanks, y'all. Bye.